Hi, and welcome to the Desert Lady Diaries podcast, a weekly conversation with women who found their home in the Mojave Desert. I'm Dawn Davis, and this is episode number 34. If you're a first-time listener, welcome. And if you're a returning listener, thank you so much for coming back. If you're looking for more information about the podcast, past guests, or want to catch up on previous episodes, or just want to drop me a line, it's all at the website, desertladydiaries.com. We're on Facebook and Instagram at Desert Lady Diaries and on Twitter as Desert Lady Diary. This week, you'll meet Tonelise Rugaas. She's going to tell us how a Norwegian ends up living surrounded by sand in the desert after living surrounded by water on a houseboat in London. I'm here today with Tonelise. She is a Norwegian in the desert. After 20 years in London, which was home base to world travels, Tonelise came to live in Joshua Tree. She appreciates the wildlife and plant life of the desert and loves sharing the wonders of the desert with her Airbnb guests. She writes and paints, and having studied since childhood, is an accomplished tarot reader who coaches others in the art. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you, Dawn.
So, I always start with, what was your first encounter with the desert?
Well, my first encounter was a few years back, about probably 5 years now. And I came out here for a road trip with my friend from LA, because I used to go and live in LA for 3 months every winter, because I lived on a houseboat in London and it got cold.
Yeah.
So escaping London weather. And we went out here, and I've never been to a desert before. And I know that, I opened the car door and I put my foot out onto the sand, and I knew that, oh, here it is. And I hadn't even been out of the car. And I don't know what it was. I just knew that it was something. And then, things started to conspire to get me here. So 4 years or 3 years later, I moved over.
What kind of things conspired to move you?
A year on from that, I visited my friend for New Year's. It's kind of weird because I was staying in her house, and I had this dream that 1 year down the line, this time next year, I would live in that house. But it wasn't my house, and there was one next door, and I thought, well, maybe it's that one. And I didn't think about it much, but in March she rang and she said that she wanted to sell the house, and I said, I'll buy it, don't put it on the market. So 1 year on from that, on the 28th of December, I actually moved in.
Wow. And then what was that process like? Because you've got this houseboat in London, and then you're moving to the desert.
Well, after the house went in a very long escrow, which she was kind enough to agree to, so I had to sell assets, and I also had to deal with other things like being able to live here as a permanent resident. And
in the US?
In the US, okay. Correct. But, I had to sell assets, which I started to do. So I had 2 houseboats and a flat in Norway. I sold 1 boat and a flat in Norway, and I kept my main boat, the Enterprise. I sold Voyager, so I was no longer an admiral on the Federation fleet, but I could make the ball rolling.
Exactly. So when you moved, besides your friend that was selling the house, was she moving somewhere else within the desert, or was she just moving somewhere else?
She was moving somewhere else in the desert, to further out.
Gotcha. Mm-hmm. Okay. So when you did finally move and made this your permanent residence, how did you start getting involved in the community? Did you know other people besides the woman you bought the house from when you came?
Just a couple of them, because I've met them through having visited. Mm-hmm. But I had nothing that I could call close or good friends.
Right.
But that's fine, because I found that wasn't hard here. So I went to our breakfast out on the final frontier, and I met a gentleman there who introduced me to a lot of people, and I started volunteering, serving the community breakfast in Copper Mountain Mesa Community Center, and basically just started saying hi to people and hi to my neighbors, kind of humbly, goggle-eyed, obviously, because it's such a new environment on all levels. And, I'm the new girl, and put my hand out. And I found that it was easy to get to know people here. However, to keep regular relationships a longer time is a completely different matter. So I would not, for instance, due to that, advise anyone to come here if they hate their own company.
Yes.
It's not for everyone.
Right. And let's talk about that a little bit.
You got to be ready for it. You have to be ready for this extreme silence. I chose deliberately to live in a particularly, some people will call it isolated, I would call it
heaven.
Nice. Yeah. It takes a while to totter over to my neighbors. I can't just pop across the road. But the view is incredible thanks to the US military keeping it clean, because it's the 29 Palms Marine Base.
Right.
When you're new, people come visit you all the time, and you've been here for a while, it kind of turns into normal life, and you have to maintain your autonomy as a human out here way more than in a city. But it doesn't have the same feeling of loneliness as you have when you're alone in a city, which is because that can be depressing.
Right, surrounded by so many people, and yet you're alone. Whereas out here, you're right, it's a very different kind of aloneness.
It is, because if you feel like it here, there's always something happening and you can get out and you can do stuff. I also feel that quite secure in my community because I know that my neighbors will help me if I need it. And then all of a sudden you start saying no to things, and it's easy, very easy to retreat into being a desert rat. So I think a healthy balance is important. So I go see friends in LA once a month. Just to get kind of a flavor of city.
Right. I do that too. I don't necessarily go once a month, but I do go maybe every 2 months or 3 months, depending. Well, just to get a buzz. Yeah.
You know, when time allows, I do it once a month-ish. I spend some time sitting in traffic, which is a lot easier when you don't have to do it every day.
Right.
Then my car becomes my metal womb and I listen to music.
Yeah.
And visit my friends. And then it's really nice to come back here and have the silence because, you know, out where I live in North Joshua Tree, it's the silence is deafening.
Yes. And there's when I first came out, even sometimes now when I drive out to the Palms in Wonder Valley, I'll just get out of the car and just stand there and let it wash over me. And sometimes it brings me to tears still.
See, I have that silence at home. And, you know, since we're talking about silence, interestingly, I read an article yesterday, let you know that it is indeed peer-reviewed and scientific from Psychology Today, about what silence does to the brain. Because I've had this theory for a while after living in an extremely silent place for more than 2 years now, that it's beneficial.
Absolutely.
So my interpretation is that maybe it literally creates some more space because you don't have to process white noise all the time.
Right.
This study shows not that, but similarly that when you are exposed to silence, the brain actively works with problem solving, and the cells in the cognitive part of the brain actually starts renewing themselves. Because, you know, we lose brain cells all the time. It's the way we are constructed. So being exposed to silence actually rebuilds people's brains.
Well, it's interesting. I notice I love silence, and I don't really put music on or anything like that. But I know that there are people who will avoid it because, like you said, once you get into a place where all you can hear is your own thoughts, sometimes our own thoughts are so annoying that we decide we need to shut them off by turning on some music, turning on the TV, going somewhere else to get more stimulated so we don't have to hear those things. It's kind of like shutting ourselves off. Whereas if you come here, I felt like it will really allow you to hear those voices. I just did a 10-day silent Vipassana retreat, and you're surrounded by people, but no one is speaking.
Well, I live in a silent retreat.
Great.
Well, yeah, it's interesting what you're saying. However, everyone's different. And I've had guests coming out to mine, particularly musicians who've been touring a lot. And those are my friends who are musicians and who's toured a lot and, you know, sat next to the subwoofer. So they have tinnitus. I have a little bit myself, so I always hear this little beep, but it's not too bad. I'm used to it.
Right.
But if you have that badly, silence can be annoying because it alerts you to have to listen to that beep in your head all the time.
Yeah.
So when that happens, sometimes they can't handle it and they ask me, do you have a little radio or something? And yeah, I do. And I have friends who can't sleep without that in the background to basically get rid of or be a competition to the tinnitus. So, you know, people are different in that respect.
Yeah.
And I had some guests that came down from Chicago. I didn't realize at the time that she had decided to use her stay as a way of challenging herself because she was so scared of silence, she's scared of the dark. It also gets extremely dark out at mine. And she had chosen deliberately their unit with an outdoor bathroom, so she had to go out into the dark.
Wow.
So, you know, it's forcing herself to face her fears.
Yes.
And she managed brilliantly, but she was nervous.
Of course. Yeah. Did you know that she was coming to do that specifically before she booked?
No, she told me afterwards. And she was happy when she left. She felt that she had overcome something important in her life. And obviously it's not completely gone, but maybe akin to, you know, getting back up on the horse to get rid of the fear. You just have to face it.
Right.
And I'm near. So if it was a problem, she could give me a call.
That's great.
And she knew that. But, the combination of deafening silence and almost velvety dark, where you get, particularly around new moon time, I can see why I would challenge city people because, in comparison to the bright lights of the human world, when you come out here in the zone, it's almost like entering into a tomb.
Exactly. And I relate to that, having been a couple of times out in the ocean in the dark.
The ocean's noisy. Well, yeah, it can be can be silent. It's funny that because the sound, the way sound carries when you are at sea is very similar to how the sound carries in the desert.
Right, farther than you would think.
Way farther.
So speaking of the Airbnb, how is that all going as an owner? What are some of your challenges and what are some of your nice surprises?
Oh, it's going really well. I don't really have any surprises. It's exactly how I thought it would be. I'm sorry. I do extreme vintage homes. And people know that. They're basically buying a trip back in time. So I have people who come out here for that. And since we were mentioning silence, I don't allow parties. I don't allow them to be loud. I have musicians sometimes, but they cannot do anything amplified. But I've had musicians who come out to write, so that's fine. So most of the time people are nice, but to be honest, there are particularly age groups that thinks that the world started the year they were born, and who thinks that extreme high end is the normal and it should be cheap and you should be at their beck and call, and that can be a bit annoying, but it's particular age groups who do that.
Gotcha.
And most of the time people are really, really nice. I just wish they would read the bloody listing first. That would help a lot. So I don't have to explain everything when they arrive.
What is the number one thing that is in the listing that they say, wait, I didn't know that?
Dirt roads.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I send them emails as well. Make sure that the directions, telling them about the dirt roads, but they don't read it.
Right.
It's amazing what they don't read. So I'll check everybody in personally, and it takes about 10 to 20 minutes depending on how receptive they are. And then I'll go through it with them, and they get it. So
it's probably good to have that reinforcement just in case anyway.
I won't do Airbnb all my life, but I came here, I'm an immigrant, I came here to live in the desert, and I had to find some way to create a business fast that I knew would be sustainable and sustainable financially, but also sustainable in terms of assets and sustainable in a literal interpretation of the word.
Right.
Because I run it very much like that. I provide them with glass bottles, everything is compostable. I really make an effort to avoid single-use plastics and detergents and everything. I don't care if it's natural, because that may not be better for you than artificial, but I care if it's sustainable or not. I'm trying to do something green out there.
Nice.
Some of them appreciate it, some of them don't even notice, but I notice because I clean up after them. I do everything myself for now, and I notice how much less trash they leave if you run it that way.
Well, and that's just helpful overall for you, for the environment, for everything. Yeah,
and that sustainability has become important to me after I moved out here, because when you live in a city, you're a bit distant from it. Out here, I literally live in the middle of nature, and I also live in a part of the world where nature is very, very harsh, but also very vulnerable, and you become aware of that. So it was a bit of an awakening in terms of that. Everything out there has a defense mechanism. Either it's poisonous or it's pointy, or it's got thorns, or it's got something,
Right.
And most of the animals are hardcore. The desert is not for wimps.
No.
So one cannot come out here with a city attitude and throw away your kombucha bottles in the desert. It doesn't work like that. You can't just come out here and set up a music system on the porch. You can't come out here to just fly a drone.
I think there is some kind of a view of the desert as like the wild, wild west, and you can just go out there and do anything you want. And the fact of the matter is, you really can't, and you shouldn't.
It's Wild West in other ways to me, in terms of the environment, the animals. Some animals that people are naturally afraid of because of their venomous. When you live out here next to them, it's an eye-opener. They're fine. You just don't bother them. There's spiders, scorpions, snakes, everything. So in terms of that, it is a bit like the Wild Wild West, because it's wild.
Right.
Literally is wild.
Sure.
But,
I guess I meant from a unrestrained ability to do just whatever you please.
Yeah, I understand that. But the way I see it is like the snakes, the Mojave greens, they have been here for 250 million years and now just got here. So it's absolutely possible to live side by side by these things without necessarily having to react to killing stuff.
Right, exactly. Well, I've had scorpions in here. I've had a snake, like in my first month. I'm sitting on the couch and it came right in under the door, under the couch, under the TV. And I was like, and at that moment I said, you know what? You moved here.
Yeah.
This is what happens here.
Deal with it.
Don't pick up the phone and call somebody. You got to figure it out, which I did.
May I just suggest that next time you've got a snake coming inside, do call someone. Just someone who can get rid of it for you.
Okay.
Doesn't have to kill it.
No, right. But they can pull it out.
Yeah.
Is that Bert Lies? Does he do that?
Well, he's one of them.
Yeah.
And there's Michael
Jane.
McManaman does it. He came and removed my snake. But they would never kill the snakes.
No.
The thing is, I don't want to handle them. And if you look at the statistics of who's being bitten, the whole clue is do not handle them.
No. My friend was the broom. And I was like, and then talking to it, saying, I'm really glad you came today, but you know you don't belong in here, and I know you don't belong in here, so let me help you see the door. It never came up at me or anything. It was a coach whip, somebody identified
but that's
it as.
not venomous.
Which is not, right, well, I didn't know that when it came in the door.
Okay. Next time, look for the triangular head.
Right.
And be aware that not all rattlesnakes have rattles anymore. It's a mutation. There are a small percentage of them, like just under 15%, that's born without a rattle. Oh. And that's unfortunate for the snake.
Absolutely.
Because it can't warn you. Then again, they think, when I say they, it's biologists, that it has developed this because of the influx of people. It's in its interest to be more quiet now. It still has a triangular head and a diamond pattern.
Right.
I wouldn't handle those. They are no joke. I would never kill a scorpion.
No.
I would never kill a tarantula.
I have a broom and a dustpan that I use more for putting things out the door, like live things, than I use for sweeping anything up off the floor.
I'm not that hardcore. I do the good old metal salad bowl and a record cover.
Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you can hear them on the inside of on the metal salad bowl, trying to get out.
Yeah.
And then again, I'm not a Buddhist. I will kill a black widow with no hesitation. And I don't like the solifuga, the camel spiders or sun spiders.
Oh, okay.
They will meet the underside of my foot, which I'm freely admitting here on record. Mm-hmm. But I try not to kill things.
Right. Yeah, I try and just put them on that dustpan thing and cover it up with the brush, and I take them out front and say, you're back in your environment. You don't belong in my house.
But it's an interesting environment, and that's another thing that I explain to people who come visit. Something to do with just respect them, and the best way to do that is to leave them alone and don't attempt suicide by Instagram.
Yeah.
So it's better to stay alive than to run after the snake and to try to get a picture of it.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Yeah.
Talk to me about your tarot.
I started doing that when I was 9. It was kind of a hand-down thing. And studied that very, very extensively. I don't use it as fortune-telling because I think that's insulting to the tarot. But what it is a pictorial tool. It's a picture of archetypes that can be used as either meditational tools or used to understand in combination. Applies to our subconscious globally, and I say globally or universal because of the word archetype, which comes back from Jung, and these are pictures we have in our heads that we are not completely aware of, like Mother Earth is a picture, the shadow, the wilderness, the unknown, our Father the Sun, the moon, our Father the Sun, Lady the Moon, and Mother Earth. That's the whole family. The rest is filler, really, but that's just examples of archetypes. There are many. The Wise Old Man on the Mountain. A lot of so-called spiritual books, including the Bible, which, whatever one thinks of it, is clearly a spiritual book, has stories of the Old Man on the Mountain in Mount Sinai, Moses, most notably. And these stories are shared bilaterally, interreligiously throughout the world. And they are depicted, not literally, but pictorially on the tarot. And it gives you a particular understanding when you see a picture that you intuitively recognize. But I don't do this approach to it like, will he call me in 10 minutes?
No.
Where's my dog?
Right.
Am I pregnant? It's like a pregnancy test is a very good tool to find that out. That's not what I'm there for.
Right.
It's more like a therapy session, if you may. It's quickly into coaching. It's not ethical of me to tell people what to do. I'm not God. but I can inspire them to tell themselves what to do. Then they'll do it.
When you say it was handed down to you, was this a family? Was it your mother, grandmother?
Yes.
Or?
I'm from northern Norway, which is full of Norwegians, but it's also full of Sami people, which is the Norwegian indigenous population.
Oh.
And that's a shamanic approach to life.
Okay.
So in England, they would call it pagan. I don't care. It's potato, rubbish bin, trash can. But it's still the whole idea of being a part of nature and call upon nature if you need answers to something. And then when I say nature, I mean cosmos, not just Mother Earth or and the creatures who live universe on it and travels on it over it. So yeah, I kind of grew up with that. We didn't go to doctors much before my grandmother died. So to me, everything is the same in that respect. And I was introduced to the tarot, which is a Western European tool of magic. And it's the main Western European spiritual tool. So this is something to do for us who hark back from that part of the world to find our own, I wouldn't say spirituality because it's such an abused word. I'm more spiritual than you. And that's not right. But we find our own center through a tool that comes from our place. So you don't have to go to India to find it. You don't have to go to anywhere else to find it. You don't have to go to pilgrimages to find it. It's all in you.
It's just
and this is a tool that comes from our place of the world, and knowing, it helps to know a lot of history, particularly Renaissance history, because it's roughly, 14th, 15th century, where it kind of became what it is, the card deck. And knowing how they ruled the world then aids you in knowing what these archetypes alludes to and how it can be transferred into our experience of our world today, regardless of where you stand, what your creed is, how rich or poor you are, whether you are male or female, or indeed what you believe in. The tarot doesn't lend itself to any particular faith, but it's very open in terms of talking to people of all faiths.
Being available to everyone.
Yeah, and also faithless people or atheists, it's absolutely fine. People are people, it doesn't matter, because it's based on pictorial archetypes. And those we share.
And you do coaching with that as well?
A reading is a coaching session.
I gotcha.
If the client doesn't feel more hopeful and has some more tools to solve whatever issue they want to know about or explore within themselves through the tarot, I've failed. So this thing about it's going to be like this, it's going to be like that, I don't do that. And this thing is about, oh yeah, it happened exactly like you said. That sounds to me like an extremely bad reading, because what we want to instigate is change out of set patterns. And that's up to the client.
Right.
But they are aware of the patterns and they have some tools, because you can't lie to archetypical images. That is a part of your psyche.
Right. I just take what I feel applies to me. Like you said, we all have the knowledge within us to know what our direction is and what our path is, and it's just kind of sitting with that sometimes in self-reflection and figuring it out.
Absolutely. And this idea that some people are more open than others, I think that's an extremely entitled statement. The whole thing is people are people regardless of where they are coming from. And I've found that in New Age, which is, probably kind of offend everyone here, which is a term and also actually a state of mind, and to me a pseudo-religion, because I can't avoid that doing what I do when I do my writings about tarot and magic, particularly hermetic magic, i.e. Hermes Trismegistus. I just want to mention, I know I'm digressing here, but I just want to mention Corpus Hermeticum, which is my holy book in a way, if anything is holy. And it's the second book that was translated, or not translated, but put in print after the Bible. And it's a thin little thing. It's $4 on eBay in paperback. And it's basically a book of deep, deep magic. And magic is the Western European equivalent to yoga. If you do both, you're laughing. That's fine. It's an approach to life that, I wouldn't say it opens you up, but it makes you listen. So yeah, I'm digressing. So what I'm saying is that these things are available to everybody. It's not that you have the gift or that you have been bestowed on some special wonderful light has been bestowed on you, unlike everybody else. That's an entitled statement. It's also quite fascist if you think about it. I am better than you. But everybody are able to listen to the so-called cliched voice within if we are willing to do that. And like we discussed earlier when we were talking about silence, it can be quite scary to listen to the so-called voice within.
Yes.
And sometimes we need help. So you may need a coaching session. Tarot reading can be helpful, but you know what? Sometimes you just need a therapist, or sometimes you need a walk in the woods, or a dip in the cowboy bath, or put some plants in the ground, or talk to a dog.
Right.
There are so many avenues, but every single person on this planet, I will claim, is talented in terms of just knowing. Are you getting sentimental?
I am.
Oh dear.
I don't know what it was that you said. It just struck me about the...
Well,
you know, because those are so many different ways of being meditative, I suppose.
Sure, but I'm sitting here and I'm basically telling you in not so many words that you are a magical divine being, as is everybody. And it doesn't matter what you believe in and what you vote for. Every single person on this planet is a divine magical being. And to me, it's a lot of hope in that.
Yeah, for sure. You know, I did a lot of advocacy work down in Skid Row in downtown LA.
Yeah.
And I often think about the people that are there and that they don't realize how much they have inside of them.
Well, that's a very good point, because it's really hard to realize how much you have inside of you when your main task for the day is survival and having food input in your mouth and finding somewhere to safely sleep, which is, as we know, statistically is awful, particularly for women. It's dangerous. That does apply to many homeless people. However, I used to work for a shelter, I used to volunteer for them in London, which is a shelter for homeless people. And I tell you right now that a lot of them are actually really aware of this, but they can't make it pastime due to the harshness of life itself.
Right.
I did also learn from that period that we are not immune, any of us. Because when you talk to homeless people, whoever you meet, very often is, so what do you do here? What happened? What did you used to do? Oh, I was a company director. I was a painter. I had my own business. I worked for Marks and Spencer's or the BBC. And so what happened? And very often it has something to do with bereavement. And then depression and mental illness, that for people who don't get help when they lose a child, and then as a consequence they lose maybe their spouse or their partner, and as a consequence of that, depression sets in, so they can't go to work and they forfeit on the mortgage payment. And very, very few people who have mortgages are more than 2 or 3 months away from being homeless. And it's important to know these things.
Yeah.
So we treat people
with
better.
Compassion. Yeah.
Well, you treat them like you want to be treated. And that's a line from the Bible. Do to your... I'm getting this wrong because I know it in Norwegian, but I don't. The St. James version, I don't know that entirely by words, or by heart. But translate to do to thy brother as you would thy brother to do to you. That's a really, really good way of living. Unless thy brother is an absolute arsehole and you have to tell them to get out of your life, which is fine as well.
But sometimes you have to do that. But you can do
it kindly and you can do it with dignity.
Right.
However, I am, and I completely admit it, I'm entitled enough to sit and bury my nose into books about Hermeticism and read Agrippa and read stuff that was written, a couple of thousand years ago. That's, now in print. So, just the invention of the printing press was such a quantum shift in human condition. Information became available to more people than the clergy and the nuns and monks, because, not even aristocracy could read. They had scribes for that. So I can bury my nose into these things, but I am not a single mother in East London in a 1-bedroom flat with 4 kids who has to go to food banks. And I find often that, particularly into New Age, you get that. I think people tends to almost use it as an excuse to not feel and not care and not have to do anything. Oh, you choose your parents before you're born. It's a lesson you're going to have to learn in this life. Have you heard that one?
I have.
Tell that to a kid who was sold by her own parents as a sex slave in Bangkok.
Right.
You chose this. No, he or she did not. It's a lottery. And I'm born in the richest country in the world with a very high standard of living. I won the lottery the day I was born. And I'm not saying that to say that I'm better than other people, but I do think it's important to be aware of these things as a method to be inclusive with people around you and not judge people who haven't done this or have time to go to retreats, or they don't have time to go to yoga between 9 and 11 every day because they have to go to work. And that doesn't mean that they are lesser beings put on this planet to serve others. But that's an implicit attitude that I find, and I'm finding that quite scary. And it just also speaks volumes about any environment one is in, how easy it is to prefer your own kind.
That's a very interesting statement given the times we're living in right now.
Indeed. The learning process is talking to people who have absolutely polar opposite opinions and backgrounds. Because one doesn't have to agree about everything. That's not what debate is. That's an argument. That's a different thing.
Right.
One can debate. One doesn't have to argue. And, you know, it's kind of me, a Northern European woman, coming over here to the desert. Like I said, completely goggle-eyed. And I found it illuminating how things work, what people think, how people act. And regardless, really, of what people mean or think about stuff, there is a kindness that most of the time is present in human beings, who has, even sometimes by circumstances, being forced to live lives that might be frowned upon by people who are more entitled than them or have made different choices than them, because that's always what it is. So I guess all this discretion perhaps boils down to the philosophy of stuff that I do, you know, Western European ritualistic magic. There's no black magic, by the way, just for the record. No animals are killed. There are no orgies. It's a silent what's the word?
Contemplative.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Contemplative. You learn a new word every day when you're a newbie. It's a silent contemplative attitude to being a part of the world.
Kind of just taking care of your own business, I guess, to a certain extent.
Well, I would never push it on other people, but
Right.
what I mean is kind of if I believe everything's connected and everyone's connected, and
I agree.
And like I said earlier, that everything alive has a level of, I'm trying deliberately to use very laden religious words, but I would still say holy. I'm very careful by using the word divine because it can really offend people, but everything living has an element of what is holy in it. And to me, it's all connected in some weird way that it completely makes sense inside my own head.
Right.
But it's very hard to explain.
Yes. I thank you very much for coming today. That gives us a lot to think about, too.
Are we done already?
Yes, we are.
Time flies when you have fun,
It
doesn't
is, see?
Okay. Well,
But I really
it's a
appreciate you
pleasure.
coming and talking about all of this.
Well, it's a pleasure. I'm now going to have coffee and relax a little. I think it's a good thing to talk about these things just straight out of bed in the morning.
Your head's clear?
Yeah,
Yes.
the realities of life are about to set in, but they haven't
Exactly.
done so yet. So thank you very much for having me.
You are welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for listening to the Desert Lady Diaries podcast. I want you to know how much I appreciate you taking the time to tune in. If there was something that enlightened or inspired you, let me know by sharing it with me and the other listeners on the Desert Lady Diaries Facebook page. Next week, 29 Palms resident Marilyn Fernald will be sharing her memories of raising her family in 29 Palms in the 50s and 60s. And last, would you do me a little favor? Would you go to the ratings and review section of the platform where you're listening and leave a rating and review of the podcast? I'd really appreciate it. Thanks so much for listening.